Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The X, a podcast about how experience shapes everything from products to services to entire businesses. I'm your host, Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Magical. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's remote working. We've been hearing a lot about this over the last few months as tech companies are leading the way with allowing their workers to stay home either indefinitely or until late 2021. Hey, man, good morning from Hawaii. I'm currently working from the beach at a house I rented.
No, you're not.
Yeah, but that's what I wish. But that's what a lot of people are
Yeah.
trying to do right now, and hoping to do forever.
Oh, yeah. All of us are now wishing that in hindsight we had gone to Hawaii at the right time and just kind of got stuck there, and we're still there working. But hey, you do what you have to do.
Exactly. I'm super stoked about this topic because you and I have essentially been working. I know we had an office, but essentially working remotely for the last 15 years. Um,
hmm
we had the office, but the office was mostly for bringing customers in and also participants for testing. But we kind of work wherever we want to work, except for during the time in which we're working directly on a study with a client. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I kind of want to start it off this way because I have a lot of stuff I want to talk about today, is what would you say to someone based on your experience, because you're very experienced in remote working, is the pros and cons of doing it?
Well, the number one pro is that you just have more control over your time. You're not losing an hour and a half to 3 hours a day sitting in traffic when you have 14 hours of work to do in a day. It just allows you to be a lot more productive. At least it allows you to have much more control over it. You can avoid a lot of the distractions that occur when everybody's coming by your desk every 10 minutes in order to see how you're doing or ask you a question about something.
Uh huh.
For someone like me who does a lot of data analysis and writing reports, it's kind of essential because anytime in an office, it's almost like, all right, well, the kind of work I can do when I'm in an office is going to be different. It's going to be more interactive. It's going to be more collaborative. It's going to be more kind of like getting in meetings and coming to consensus on things. But if when I need to get through some data and surface some insights, it's best to do it at home. It's best to lock myself
Yeah.
in the office and shut off the world, throw in some headphones, and just really focus.
Yeah. Well, do you ever get lonely or anything? Or, I mean, are there any kind of cons to that process?
I feel like I personally don't very much. I know other people definitely do, and it's great to have the option to go into the office when you need to, and when that's kind of affecting you. And you also need to kind of get out of your own head a little bit because too much time alone, you end up kind of having like a psychological drift from the rest of society, right? So you do need to engage interpersonally, definitely from time to time. It absolutely helps that we have things like Zoom and Slack and those kinds of messaging platforms so that we can communicate with people. There are from time to time a need to just get in person one on one, and that's something we know also from getting out in the field and interacting with users. Right, there's only so much you can get from message boards and customer complaints. Sometimes you got to go out there and see
Hmm.
them face to face and fully understand their context and understand like where the disconnect might be between the things that they're saying and the things that they're experiencing, because not everybody is an extremely disciplined objective communicator about what's going on for them, so you have to fully understand their context to place their comments in full understanding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I a little bit different than you. I can spend quite a bit of time, kind of working alone and doing just video calls and stuff like that. But I get a little bit lonely, like in the sense
Mhm.
that like I like it when we meet up with clients, like in downtown Palo Alto, and we have lunch and we go get coffee and we just walk and chat and that kind of stuff feels good. You're like outside, you're in the sun, you get to spend time with other people. So like I have to like turn that up just a little bit in order for me to kind of feel like productive and kind of like I'm contributing to something in society. But with this time during the pandemic, everyone now is working from home, and one of the concerns early on was that, well, productivity is going to go down. Like people are going to be distracted and all that kind of stuff. And for years, you and I have been telling people, and honestly, like I don't think they believed us, but I was like, no, productivity actually goes up because you have
Oh yeah,
more time
definitely.
during the day. And then when you're kind of bored at night or whatever, you're like, oh, I'll just sit down and finish off this piece of work that I needed to get done. And right now, the latest numbers I saw were her productivity was up between 25 and 40% with tech
Wow,
workers.
that's impressive. So one question that's running through my mind, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if you do either. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this. Is that I've thought for a while now that that our colleagues in the tech industry have gotten a little bit too meeting happy. Like there's just too many
Mm-hmm.
meetings going on. There needs to be a little bit more balance as far as like let's handle this in a different way rather than like devoting an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours to sitting around a table talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I wonder to what extent that community, if there is even just a 10% drop in the number of meetings that people are committed to each day, is going to allow them to be more productive.
Well, the feedback that I'm getting from people who work, within a company, you and I don't, we support companies, but is that their meetings really haven't changed very much, and that for the most part, they're doing somewhere around 6 hours a day of meetings, and
Yeah.
then still having to work in the evenings to get their actual work done. So there's like a ton of this collaboration still going on, but people are still feeling a bit overwhelmed because most of their day is dedicated to Zoom meetings.
Yeah. Well, I imagine even in that case, it's still, you think about the time that it takes to walk from one meeting to the next. I mean, that's if you're in 6 meetings all day and that takes 5 to 10 minutes each, that's like an hour out the window right there, just walking from one conference room to another.
Oh, sure. And most of these meetings, always last to at least 45 minutes to an hour, right?
Hmm.
And also, people are getting used to not being able to like chit chat as much and just kind of get right to the point because, you could still chit chat and talk and, a little bit like when you get into one of these, Zoom meetings or whatever. But the fact is it's kind of not the same as like when you're walking into a room and everyone's like, oh, those are really cool shoes, and then there's whole like side conversation happens and stuff like that. So I think the dynamic has definitely changed quite a
Hmm.
bit. So one of the things I did as a little bit of homework before this podcast was I kind of outlined all the concerns that people have about working remotely, either for a long period of time or indefinitely. And I got some of these from online. People have posted things as well as I talked to friends. And I compiled a list here and I thought maybe we can talk about this list. So number one is that by working from home indefinitely or for a very long period of time, there's a little bit of a concern about proximity to people in power. And what they mean by that is like typically you're having the opportunity to interact with your senior leadership, right, on a regular basis when you're in the office. And then in this case, you're actually not really interacting with them very much. You're mostly just kind of working on the projects that you need to get done. But
Hmm.
when you do have a chance to interact with them, like in the office, they can get to know you a little bit. You can hear things, they can share things with you, and you kind of feel more connected and kind of have a better feeling about your growth within the company. And
Yeah.
so there is a little concern about that.
Well, here's the thing, right? I'm a little bit different than I think a lot of people when it comes to the idea of how promotion should happen.
Yeah.
I personally would like to remove some of these interpersonal biases of I'm going to promote this person because I know them and I like them, as opposed to I'm going to promote this person because their work has high quality. So
Yeah.
from my perspective, liking that approach, preferring a less personal approach to promotions. Not to say that it's going to be completely impersonal, because I feel like you need to know that you can that person's strengths and weaknesses. But if you can remove the interpersonal preference factor from promoting people, I think it will be overall an improvement. Now that makes it more difficult for people who honestly aren't putting out as quality a work product as some of their coworkers. They can't make up for that with the interpersonal preferences.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that will be a concern for them, but I think systemically it would actually probably be a bit of an improvement.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one. And the reason why I say that is because I think that people skills are very valuable. So I think that if you are connecting with your superiors and your bosses and you're having conversations and you're having this opportunity to kind of talk to them about your ideas and that kind of stuff, they can kind of pick up on your interpersonal skills, right? So some people are better at management oriented tasks or well, management oriented tasks, meaning that they're good with working with people. And then there's some people that don't necessarily want to work with a lot of people and are really good with putting their head down, right? So it's a better assessment to figure out who would fit into what role better if you
Yeah.
have an opportunity to spend time with both of them, assuming work product is equal. Meaning, like
Yeah.
the work product that comes from two people are pretty equal, but one of them really loves being around people and the other one really doesn't, right? So you
Mhm.
can kind of pick up on that over time. And I think it's more than just saying, do you like working with people? Do you want to have people working underneath you?
Yeah. Well, I think you can still kind of get a feel from that from working remotely with someone. But I think number one needs to be if you're comparing two directors, for example, for a VP role, and one person doesn't feel like they have the same interpersonal skills, but their group is significantly outperforming the other person, that needs
Mm-hmm.
to be the most important thing. Because even though their interpersonal style may not feel as impressive,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing is working for them, right? I understand if they're much closer and it can be more of a deal breaker. I listen to
Mm-hmm.
some podcasts for like NFL scouts, for example, and
Yeah.
they'll talk about how the combine can be a little bit more of a tiebreaker bit of data relative to studying the tape and seeing their performance throughout the year, as opposed to it really being about the combine. So people will come out and you'll see somebody go out there and throw up amazing numbers in the combine, but it's from what I'm hearing from the NFL scouts, that doesn't change their draft position a huge deal. It can be confirmatory, it can be a tiebreaker, but it doesn't change kind of the work that they put on film. And I kind of feel the same way about when it comes to moving up within promotions. The
Mm-hmm.
work product has to be the most important thing. And I think there's
Yeah.
definitely examples, not to say that everybody does this for sure, but there are certainly examples of people who are able to misrepresent what work is theirs, or basically bootlickers who are figuring out ways to move up the corporate chain. We've seen people like this who are not really capable. And it stands out like a sore thumb because a lot of people are very capable, but every now and then you get someone who managed to work up the chain and they don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. We do see that. The other thing that's actually come up was that there's an old bias for people who work from home from a long time ago. Maybe
Mm.
like 10, 15 years ago, and it was that if you wanted to work from home a lot, that means you were not interested in climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah, and I think
Right.
that is with this now becoming more normalized, we can start to look at kind of, well, ultimately, like I said before, looking at objective factors as far as like the quality of their work, as opposed to kind of, it reminds me a little bit of Moneyball, the movie, when they're like, oh, you see that guy's girlfriend? Like, she doesn't have enough self confidence. And I'm just like, really? Like, that it feels like they're trying to, poker face their way through an evaluation of like, I know better than the data tells me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
your intuition absolutely is valuable. That objective data, the performance of their group or their individual work product needs to be first and foremost.
The other one is, how do you create relationships if you're not together? Right? Is it going to be more challenging to really get to know that coworker if you're not going out and having lunch with them and chatting with them more about like their personal life and kind of getting to know them? Is it going to make it so that people are just kind of shuffling work back and forth to get something done rather than having a really motivated, cohesive team?
Well, I think that is a concern for sure, and I think that's less so of an issue as far as the relative to or it's more of an issue than the proximity to power. The one thing I will point out before we move off that proximity to power is that one of the bigger concerns for me is the accountability and the ability to oversee what's happening within that group. So if there's something negative going on, if there's some abuse relationship, if there's something that needs to be corrected, it's going to be more difficult for the people in oversight positions to see what's going on and to make effective changes. Um,
Yep. Yep. It's going to require new tools, I think, and
yeah,
new transparency, and having basically having people who work within the company feel comfortable talking about people
yeah.
who are higher up from them and being able to kind of submit that information to like human resources and stuff like that as they see fit without, repercussions. right?
Absolutely.
And figuring that whole thing out, because I think that can get really messy, because there's a lot of startups around here, in the past 10 years that I've read articles about that are just like really bad stuff happening internally, just stuff getting kind of run amok. And we've learned from that. And basically what we've learned is that you have to have transparency. People have to feel like they can say what they want to say.
Hmm.
And when you do that, you tend to get a pretty good group of people within the org.
Yeah, and this kind of relates. This brings things back to what we were talking about as far as relationships. Is we've seen the rise of the bro culture in Silicon Valley. You and I have been around long enough to remember when things weren't like that, and it would be great
Yeah.
to kind of get back
Oh yeah.
to it being about the product and being about the work and not being so much about showing off or egos and that kind of stuff. But I think when it comes to relationship building and establishing culture, that's going to be the biggest break on the system when it comes to transition to primarily working remotely. And I think ultimately the most effective model is going to be if we were at 80-20 before, 80% working in the office and 20% working from home, it will probably need to flip to something like 70-30 or 20-80, where it's 30% still in some form of office or 20% still in some form of office in order to internalize a culture, in order to create relationships amongst people. If we try to go, 95, 100% working remotely where you never actually meet any of your coworkers in person, I think that will be a huge limitation. One way you can get around that, though, is somebody could work in that office for a period of time, and then now they want to move across the country in order to kind of change their lifestyle for whatever reason or be closer to their family. As long as they've built those relationships first before they go, then I think that could make sense. But some of the scenarios that I've been thinking about is, for Silicon Valley, for example, if you have an office in Palo Alto, maybe you don't have to live in Silicon Valley or the Peninsula or San Francisco anymore. Maybe you can live in Monterey or Santa Barbara and just come up once every couple weeks or once every month, spend a couple days working in the office with people and in-person meetings, and then go back to your nice house on the coast that doesn't cost nearly as much as a place in Palo Alto.
Yes, yes. So I do want to talk about that, and we'll jump into that in a second. But there was one more bullet on the list here I wanted to discuss from the people that I kind of talked to and surveyed before we actually jump into that topic, because that one is a big one. And the final one is for the creatives that are out there, the industrial designers, the visual designers, things like that. Can working remotely damage their creative process? Because we know, working with a lot of industrial designers, when you put them in a room, with a bunch of tools and, ideas and stuff, they'll sit there with each other together and just be like, oh yeah, this isn't working. Oh yeah, you should try shaving this side and then putting this pin there. And it's like, and that's kind of how things kind of get invented and made. Right. So if everyone's working from home and just kind of shuffling, let's say, prototypes, back and forth through with a courier, I just feel like that's going to be, they're the ones that are going to suffer the most.
Well, yeah, I think that when it comes to working remotely, I don't think it's going to apply to everybody. It's going to apply to a lot of people like us or people who are doing a lot of software. But if somebody's like a hardware prototyper, for example, they might be able to spend less time in the office, but they're still going to need access to a workshop that will allow them to work in hardware. One thing I will say, though, when it comes to creatives in general, whether you're an industrial designer or you're a visual designer or a storyboard artist, whatever it happens to be, is getting out of the office, getting out of your house, and into the real world can have a more positive effect on your creativity than being stuck in a static location.
I agree. I was watching the Disney documentary about Imagineers, and
Oh
then I
yeah.
was doing the actual coursework, which is like Imagineering in a box. And one of the things that they said is that, like, when they wanted to study these different plants and trees and stuff that they wanted to put all around these different lands, they got in a car and they're like, "Hey, let's drive to Joshua Tree and go see what those trees look like. Let's drive to this other place and just go look at them. Let's if we see a homeowner that has like a really interesting tree going in their yard, let's knock on the door and ask them if we can take pictures of it." Right? Like, they get out into the world and they really figure out how things are done, and then they use that as their fuel in order to create what they need to create in the parks.
Yeah, and we know that
And we
from
can
our
learn from
personal
that.
experience. Like you and I, being we've developed some concepts that went on to become some very successful products. And unfortunately, we can't talk about those publicly. But those ideas didn't come from sitting in an ideation session in a conference room for hours. That came from being out in the world, from talking to people, from seeing how people live, from seeing kind of what exists in the market and what's lacking, and kind of being able to put it together and see like there's an opportunity here, and I can see how a concept can take form. So that inspiration, I think, comes from the world.
Yeah, and actually, I was listening to Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway's podcast the other day, and Scott made an interesting point, and he said, when it comes down to it, like, the younger people, they probably are going to want to go back to the office. Like, it's a social outlet as well. It's like
Hmm.
hanging out in the lunchroom, meeting new people. Maybe they're single and they haven't met anyone yet, right? It's like kind of it's fun and exciting and interesting, right? And then when
Yeah.
you get to a certain age where you have like more responsibilities, like, children and things like that, you kind of want to be closer to home because there's a lot of other things that need to be taken care of. Not that you're not like hitting home runs at work, but like that extra 30 minutes to be able to go and pick your kids up from school or do whatever
Hmm.
you need to do to kind of keep the system moving is extremely valuable. So I wanted to switch over and actually talk about that topic you brought up earlier. So it kind of like blows my mind when I kind of think about this. So I understand that there's a lot of people, and you do as well, that cannot work remotely. And we are not really kind of talking about that today. We're actually talking about the segment that can work remotely. And I just want to be clear about that, because I understand when we're kind of dreaming up these scenarios and what is this like and all that, it's for a very specific segment, and it's people who have that opportunity because of the type of work that they do. So the thing that kind of blew my mind the other day is I was sitting back and I was thinking about the kind of tech industry and like, what happens when people truly, without punishment, can live where they want to live and have the job that they want, right? It's
Yeah.
really crazy, right? So you took that, okay, you live in, let's say, Ann Arbor, Michigan. You went to school over there and you landed this job, let's say at Apple or Google or something like that. And traditionally, or in the past, not too long ago, when you landed that job, you had to relocate. You had to move your life all the way to California, where it's really high rents and all that kind of stuff, but very beautiful weather and nice nice people and stuff like that. But like, it's still a big fundamental shift for your life, right? Now you're in the situation where you land that job and they say, okay, great, you can live wherever you want.
Hmm.
Now people have like this choice that they've kind of been asking for their whole life. Um, and now they get it. And it's like, well, what does that actually do to like the industry? What does it do for people? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think these are far-reaching consequences that I think are going to be difficult to predict, but it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what sticks and what doesn't. But the possibilities are huge. Like, so you think about Mountain View, for example, and how much Google has gobbled up Mountain View to the point where restaurants have been pushed out. Like major other tech companies have been pushed out. Like they've just really gobbled up every single inch of office space they could possibly get their hands on, and they got blocked from building more, which is why they started investing in a bunch of real estate in San Jose. Now, you imagine if what would expect. This is it's difficult to predict because you don't know if the pendulum is going to swing back and everything we talk about is going to be wide of the mark. I would kind of expect if this takes hold that they're going to need much less office space. That's going to free up a lot of office space for startups, for smaller companies, for other tech companies to come in. But it also lets the local municipalities take a look at some of these large office space buildings that are zoned for industrial and rezone them for commercial and residential, and open up some more living space for some of these employees, some of the younger people who might want to be closer to work, or older people who want to be close to the great schools, and with greater inventory within the real estate market, can make things much more affordable for people. Not to mention the fact that people who've lived there for a while, now they're tired of Silicon Valley, they're tired of the rat race, they're tired of all the traffic and overpriced everything, and they want to go live somewhere else. It's much easier for them to do that also, because of the conditions of the environment, and also because if you can lower the prices in the most expensive places, that will have potentially ripple effects that might lower the prices in less expensive places also. So
Yeah.
that can create a lot more flexibility in kind of living situations in general, in commercial real estate, which is great for everybody. Because if you can now have a smaller office for Google in Mountain View, maybe it becomes easier for them to have smaller offices in San Francisco. Maybe their office in San Francisco can get a little bit bigger, and their office in Boston can get a tiny bit bigger, and they can open up offices in other attractive places that they don't currently have them, like Bend or something
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
It provides a lot of different possibilities, which is exciting.
I think it's super exciting. And the one thing that comes to mind though is like, are they going to revert back? Or do you think this is just a trend that is going to move forward and that's it? It's the future. Do you know what I mean? Like, so some of the concerns of people that I know. So in my neighborhood, we've already had a couple people move. One person across the street moved to the Central Valley near Sacramento
Mm-hmm.
because they were told that they're going to work remotely for like the next year, and they were like, oh, "I'm tired of living in a smaller house here. I think I want to sell it and move to the Central Valley." And they did, and they got bought a big house with a pool and the whole entire thing. So, but the only concern, the only question mark in their head is like, well, in a year or 2 years, is my company going to say, well, actually, we kind of want you all back in the office now? Or has that train left and you can't basically do that because then you'd basically have to lay all these people off, or they'd have to, or they would end up going to find someone who does allow them to work remotely. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
It's a good question. I don't really know. It's one of the things that makes me slightly skeptical that all of these changes will stick, even though I think that they have a great potential to be an improvement for people's lives. Is that it's such a huge shift from traditional thinking. And I don't know if leadership within these industries is ready to do that. Maybe they are, maybe it only takes a few, but it could very well become a kind of in that competition for talent, it could become a
Mm-hmm.
major factor, right? Of I really want to work for this company, but this other company will pay me the same and I can have much more flexibility in my lifestyle. So that I think
Well,
is,
I heard a interview with Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, and he was basically saying, "Hey, the train's already left the station." Like when it comes to competition, exactly what you were saying. He said, there are companies like Twitter and Square and Facebook and other places like that that are basically saying you can work remotely forever for all we care, right? And he
yeah.
said that's now that is the competitive advantage, right? So he said we have to offer that as well, and the next person's going to offer the next person. Then you're going to look back and you're going to realize everyone can work remotely if they want to. I think the way to frame this up, if I was talking to these CEOs and we were doing a roundtable, I would say, why don't you just say, you're an adult, we'll treat you like an adult. As long as you get your work done, have a little bit of in person, like you were talking about every once in a while, and you feel like you can succeed at your job, you do whatever you want to do. Like, why
Um,
should I tell you to come here and sit in this chair if you don't
mhm.
feel like you need to in order to be successful?
Well, that's the dream, right? And one of the things I look at it and I say, okay, well, what Twitter and Slack and Airbnb and some of these companies do is one thing. What really matters are the big 500-pound gorillas in the room. What Amazon is going to do, what Apple's going to do, what Google's going to do, what Facebook is going to do. Those FANG companies are going to kind of drive the direction this goes. If Google and Amazon buy in, with their massive amounts of employees that they have, I mean, I'm obviously for Amazon for their fulfillment centers, those people will have to work in the office still because that's just the nature of their job. Then the rest of the industry will follow suit. If they don't buy in, then they have enough influence that it's going to become a real detriment to that change happening.
Yeah, I think it's coming, to be honest with you. There's so many companies that are announcing like each
Yeah.
week, oh, you can come back in 2021, 2022. You know, after you set human behavior in one direction, like that, and you say, oh, for the last 2 years you have worked from home, you got up in the morning and you went for a workout, and then you helped your child with their school, and then you were always home for dinner at night, and you have all this spare time for yourself for 2 straight years, and then you're going to say, oh, by the way, you have to be back in the office, otherwise your performance review isn't going to be as good as it was before. Like, I just don't see it. I just don't think that this is. I think for the most part, the offices will be available, and then people will be able to come in whenever they want. But the tool of working remotely, the whole goal of Skype and Slack and Zoom and Google's GChat or whatever it is, um, Hangouts, uh, is to allow that connectivity without having to make the effort in order to physically be in the room, unless you feel you need to, right? And so I don't know. I just think that we're in a position right now, a very interesting time where people are going to be given choice. And I think it's going to be interesting to, from a research perspective, to kind of analyze them and see how this unfolds, right? Because I want to do a little experiment right now. And you're not prepared for this, which is totally fine. That's why I wanted to do it. So I want to ask you this question. Do you like living in California? Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Do you like the city that you live in?
Yes.
If you can live somewhere else, what other place do you love just as much as California?
I've been asked this. This has been a matter of debate within this house for quite some time because I'm so rabidly pro California. I was
Yeah,
born
yeah.
here. I love it here. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I have all of my roots here. I've traveled a decent amount. I can't think of another state I would want to be in if I were to if you consider other parts of California.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine too.
Parts of LA I really like. I think Santa Barbara and San Diego are beautiful, great places. I don't know that I would want to live in Gold Country per se, but it would be nice to like be able to go there from time to time more frequently, like if there had like a vacation home there or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But Hawaii obviously stands out, but Hawaii is so limited in certain ways as far as like just I mean, from a career perspective, is the biggest thing, which is kind of the point, right?
Yeah,
Because if you're in Hawaii and you're not in the tech industry, you're going to have to leave Hawaii in order to break into it.
totally.
It's also if you need to be, if you're in Hawaii and the office is in Silicon Valley, and you need to go into the office. It's not a couple hour drive up the coast like if you lived in Santa Barbara. It's a 6 hour flight.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit different. That for me, Hawaii is the only place that's also really on the radar.
Okay. So let's say, for example, that you had the opportunity to stay in my beach house in Hawaii for 6 months. I do not have a beach house, but I'm pretending right now because that would make me really happy. Is
Well, the
that, let's
first
say I have
question I
this
have is what island is it on?
oh, Kauai.
I love Kauai. I couldn't live there for 6 months. Love it, love it,
Okay,
love it.
okay,
But
okay. Let's go with Oahu. Okay, because I know
okay,
there's so much to do on Oahu. So I have this beach house in I don't know, maybe the west side of Oahu or something
all
like
right. Let
that.
me just pick for you. I'm going to say Kailua.
Yeah.
Let's say
Okay, Kailua. I love
Kailua or
Kailua. So
Kaneohe
yeah.
or
Okay.
Waimanalu.
Okay.
Um,
Let's say Kailua because they have one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. So the
yes,
house is right there near the beach and that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, no one's going to be there for the next 6 months. What are the things that would stop you from going to spend 6 months to work remotely there, knowing that your job is pretty much 100% remote?
nothing professional would stop me. To be honest, the only thing that
Okay.
might stop me is just my mom's in California and she needs some help from time to time. My brother's here though, so I mean, like that would be the only potential thing that would slow me down.
Yeah. So these are great answers because as I talk to other people and ask them, I'm getting similar responses for people who live in California. But when I talk to people who live outside of California and I say, "Hey, if you can come live here for a year in San Francisco or whatever it is, would you want to do it?" And they're like, "Oh my God, absolutely!" Right. So I feel like because California is a place that a lot of people flock to because of the great weather and the great job opportunities and things like that, people here in California are pretty happy, right? But they do move north to south, south to north constantly all the time, right? Because LA's got great stuff, but so does Northern California, right? But then people who are living in areas where they feel like they don't have as many opportunities, they may want to flock to here. Or if you if you're not from here, right? Like there's a lot of people in San Francisco that are not from here, and they have family in Michigan or Oregon or something like that. They can go home and live with their family for a year, right?
Yeah.
And they're nothing's going to happen to them. They just get up every day and they do their work just like they normally would. And as long as they have an internet connection, they have that opportunity. So I feel like we're going to see people shifting around, but I don't think we're going to see like a mass exodus. You know what I mean?
No.
I just think that people will do that. I like the idea of like living here. I love California, and I love, like you said Santa Barbara. I love Santa Barbara, all those areas. But if in the future I had the opportunity to spend a month or 2 months at another location and work remotely from there just to kind of shake things up, like on the beach in Kailua, I think that'd be super cool. And what a great life experience, right? To not be locked to one location, but have the opportunity to experience other cultures and things like that on a daily basis. And I think that actually makes more well-rounded people, right?
Hmm.
And probably people who will be better at their jobs because they're also having more fun in their personal lives.
Yeah. So I think there's massive benefits to it. I think ultimately what will determine whether or not this becomes a permanent change or is kind of a blip on the radar is whether or not the productivity advantages, the potential for cost savings from not having to maintain massive offices anymore, really becomes acknowledged and accepted by leadership at some of the FANG companies in tech. So we're just
Yeah.
thinking about the tech industry now because they will kind of lead what happens for the rest of the other industries. I think that they'll provide the example and they'll work out a lot of the kinks. But if the leadership of those companies can say, can recognize we're maintaining high productivity, and that productivity can be maintained when we're not all under some form of limited economy, when all of the outdoor activities and restaurants and movie theaters open up again, if that doesn't have a too much of a ding on our productivity, then it just makes a lot of sense economically in order to go that route.
Yeah.
And
No, that makes a lot of sense. So hey, let's talk about predictions a little bit, and I'll go first because I already wrote some notes here that I'd love to get your feedback on. So been thinking a lot about this topic because I love this topic, and I think for my predictions, I think tech is going to lead the way in this.
mhm,
Meaning, they're kind of be the people who say like, "Hey, yep, we can do this, we can make it work," and they're going to kind of teach other industries on how to make this part of their culture within their company. I think what you said about big kind of office developments, I think that stuff will slow down. And I actually think you're going to see more WeWork style setups in the future. Like WeWork's,
that's interesting.
not doing very well right now, but they could turn around, especially when you figure these big companies have these huge buildings. And if their workers are not working there, they can give up that real estate. And smaller companies can start doing the WeWork style stuff again, right? Which works. It allows people to collaborate, but also at the same time, you can have some private space. I think the tools for working remotely are going to get very good. So I think what we're going to see is all of these tools like Zoom and Slack and everything just double down, like faster, more efficient, more collaboration opportunities. I think they're going to be fabulous in the future. I think this is where we kind of wanted it to be, and a lot of people have been saying like, wow, this is like 5 years of development just got squeezed into 1 year. That is 100% true. Like people I know working on these types of tools are just working like day and night, like to make them better for everyone. And I also think because behavior has changed and people are starting to get more comfortable with spending more time at home and entertaining themselves at home and having free time in the mornings and the evenings, to sit with their friends and family and that kind of stuff. I think it's here to stay. I think that remote work will be basic part of daily routine for all of these companies. And I think it's going to kind of it's going to make people more relaxed and like their life a little bit more as we kind of get used to this and give them more choice. And I think it's all, I don't know. I think it's here to stay. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic too, and I think the biggest factor is is that economic incentive. I think when it comes to the business and kind of business behavior in general, if there's an economic incentive, it's hard to get away from it, and that will be the biggest thing. The only thing that I think can really derail it is if we see some leadership at some of these major companies kind of panic if there is
Yeah.
a late downturn in the economy after the pandemic really starts to have some of the longer lasting after effects. And
Hmm.
if they panic, they might decide to like go back to what they feel is tried and true. But other than that, I think that has a great potentiality to take hold. I think that the some of the real estate and population migration stuff that we've talked about will take a while for it to start to happen because it is a big shift and people need time to mentally kind of adjust to that, make sure that like they're not going to move from Palo Alto to Santa Barbara and then have to move back again because the company changed their policies. Um,
Yes.
but I think once things settle in, we're going to see something very different, and I'm hoping that it can create more opportunities for like startups to come along and not have to pay an arm and a leg for office space, and not have to pay for huge office space either, and then we can see a little bit more kind of organic growth and new ideas come in and not be so pressured to get an exit right away. So all of these things, including allowing people to live where they want to live, some of the benefits are massive, and it will improve the lives for people who don't get to work from home also because they will have to deal with less traffic. They'll hopefully free up space, operating space for them, reduce their commercial real estate costs, and maybe hope. I mean, in a perfect world, right? This seems might sound a little naive, but maybe some of those savings can flow through to their employees, but there's a lot of potential for improvement societally. So I'm have my fingers crossed for it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. You want to tell us what we're going to talk about on our final episode of the season next week?
So next week we're going to dig in a little bit when it comes to remote working. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the tools that are out there. So we're talking about Zoom, we're talking about Slack, and other collaborative tools like Google Docs, or Quip and things like that. So we're going to dig in and see what's working, what we'll need to improve, and how that's going to help to kind of lead this transformation.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you at the final episode next week.
Bye.